Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sunny Gray, and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Tell Us Your English. And we start this new edition right now. Thank you for joining us. The Ecuadorian Audit Office have announced the creation of a special committee to investigate the public debt administration under the government of former President Rafael Correa. The Audit Office said that the committee will be made up of 11 businessmen and judicial authorities who will analyze legal terms and the usage of the internal and external public debt between 2012 and May 2017. Former President Rafael Correa has said that the public debt has already been audited before, and he said that the committee will be formed by opposition members who are against his citizen revolution.
I want to tell all of you that the debt has been already audited until 2014. But now they want to audit it again. This is a persecution. That is the truth. Pablo Celi is an illegitimate audit officer. They control him from Carondelet Palace and from the National Assembly. And he does what he has to do in order to keep his job. Now he has become the main persecution instrument, and all the country should be aware and react to this. The audit committee is formed of opposition members who don't care about our country. They have been undertakers of our nation, but now they present themselves as the resurrectors. Enough of this. They are enemies of the citizen revolution.
Today marks 30 years since the disappearance of the Ecuadorian Restrepo brothers, who were kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by Quito police in 1988. The human rights case took years of investigation, and the bodies of the two brothers, Santiago and Andres Restrepo Arizmendi, 14 and 17 years old, have never been recovered. The police force known as SIC-10, one of the death squads that operated under the far-right presidency of Leon Febres Cordero, was eventually disbanded. And in 1995, 7 police officers were convicted and sentenced for the crime. It's been 30 years since the Restrepo brothers, Santiago and Andres, 14 and 17 years old, disappeared from Quito in 1988 under the government of former President Febres Cordero. Their family still does not know where they are. A number of events and activities have been organized in their memory.
It's been 30 years since the Restrepo family has been fighting to resolve the case of their missing children. A photographic exhibition was made in the Quito's main square, in Santiago's and Andres' honor. The exhibition narrates the most sensitive moments of the Restrepo family and inaugurates several activities to pay homage to them. Their father, Don Pedro, continues to try and find out about their children.
Los sentimientos son encontrados.
I have many feelings about my children. I don't know where they are or where their bodies are. I know guilty people are still free. Their absence breaks my heart.
Siempre me mantiene compungido el corazón.
Many artists, friends, and relatives of others' victims were together with the Restrepo family, and among them was Elsie Monge, a human rights defender.
Under the Febres Cordero government, we started to hear about the forced disappearances, and Pedro Restrepo became the symbol of resistance. At that time, we did not talk about resistance. We just talked about the abuse of power.
Andres and Santiago's sister, the filmmaker Maria Fernanda Restrepo, found a way to honor her brothers and choose art as a way to deal with it.
For me, it's the best way to remember them, to let them know we haven't forgotten them. Because we have not given up on their disappearance, we will accept any part of them. They deserve a funeral with dignity, like any human being.
During the week, the documentary called With My Hair in Yambo, made by Maria Fernanda in 2001, will be shown without charge at different places in the city. The homage will end with a presentation from Ecuador's National Ballet. What happened to the Restrepo family in Ecuador is an example of an ongoing struggle. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
On Friday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro closed the country's borders with Aruba, Curacao and Bonaire for 72 hours. Maduro took the action to prevent smuggling. He also accused the islands of not taking enough steps to prevent the contraband, which was affecting Venezuela's strategic interests.
I've ordered the immediate taking over of all ports and airports through which we communicate and have commercial and passenger exchange with Aruba, Curacao and Bonaire. So I am announcing that, as of today and for 72 hours, we are closing all air and sea communication with Aruba, Curacao and Bonaire to establish a restructuring and defense of Venezuela's economic interests.
The Barcadero port is empty after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro closed the country's borders with Aruba, Curacao and Bonaire for 72 hours. Just a few weeks ago, the port was full of copper wire and other materials that President Maduro said were being smuggled from Venezuela. Our correspondent, Medellin Garcia, has reported that Aruba's government is working on new legislation that will impose a sanction on copper smuggling.
We are at Barcadera port that receives the boats that smuggle copper wire and other strategic materials that come from Venezuela. But today we didn't find any of it. Aruba's government has recognized that there are smuggling issues between both borders and has said it's working to provide a solution to this issue. Officials also said that they will collaborate with the Venezuelan government and will modify their laws to sanction the people that smuggle and sell copper. We will keep you informed from Aruba.
Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has met with his Portuguese counterpart, Augusto Santos Silva, in Caracas to discuss the economic cooperation between both nations. During the meeting, the Portuguese minister thanked the Venezuelan government for the support to his country during the economic crisis of 2010. He also added that both nations will continue to cooperate in different areas to assist Venezuela's economy growth and contribute to the fight against the economic war. Staying in Venezuela, where this weekend governors, mayors, social movements and ordinary citizens began a series of debates to draw up the Bolivarian Revolution's governmental plan for 2019 to 2025. Our correspondent in Caracas, Freddie Gillingham, has the details.
So social forces from across the country convened over the weekend for the elaboration of the Plan of the Homeland initiative. This was in response to from a call from President Nicolas Maduro, who summoned the social forces, the mayors and the governors, to come forward to construct a renewed Plan of the Homeland. This, for those of you who don't know, the Plan of the Homeland initiative was originally set up in 2012 by the late Chavez to serve as a kind of guide of governance on how they approach various issues relating to the environment, the energy sector and climate change, with the direct participation of the social forces in the country. The planning phase for this renewed Homeland package, which will be launching on 2019 and will run to 2025, will be split into 3 different stages over a 2-week period. The final stage will have the accompaniment of the National Constituent Assembly, and we will bring you updates from that final stage of this process. That's it from me in Caracas. Back to you in the studio.
We thank Freddie for that report. The Trinidad and Tobago economy could start making a slow recovery in 2018. That's what the country's Prime Minister said in an address to the nation on Sunday evening. He attributes it in part to the gas production deal his government made with Venezuela, which is very close to completion.
And we are very close to the final sign-off of a gas sales agreement which will clear the way for operations of a pipeline from the Dragon fields to the existing Hibiscus platform, involving PDVSA, NGC and Shell. On completion of this historic bilateral development, the way will become clear for immediate access to 150 million standard cubic feet of much needed gas for the sustenance of our industrial plants in Point Lisas.
In March, the term of the President of Trinidad and Tobago, Anthony Carmona, will come to an end. His appointment will not be renewed, and on Friday both the government and the opposition met to discuss his successor. On Monday, the opposition confirmed that they will support the government choice, who will be the first female president of the republic.
This government's nominee for election to the president of Trinidad and Tobago is Madam Justice Paula May Weeks. Madam Justice Paula May Weeks, as I'm sure the population would be aware, has had a sterling, stellar career as a jurist in Trinidad and Tobago, rising to the highest level, which is the Court of Appeal in Trinidad and Tobago, where she served for approximately 11 years as a Court of Appeal judge. She started her schooling at Bishop's Anstey. I've been told that that must be made aware to the public of Trinidad and Tobago by the proud alumni of Bishop's Anstey. And then she went on to the University of West Indies.
And we have more news in a minute, so stay with us. The ELN and the Colombian government will meet in Quito, Ecuador to begin ceasefire renegotiations on Tuesday. Our Bogotá correspondent Lorena Hoyos has this report.
There's a lot of expectation around what will happen tomorrow in Quito, Ecuador, when the fifth round of negotiations begin between the National Liberation Army, the ELN, and the Colombian government. It's also the last day of the bilateral ceasefire agreement, which has been in place for 3 months so far. President Juan Manuel Santos has said that the government's negotiation team will be traveling to Quito today. Let's remember that Gustavo Bell is the new chief of the team, replacing Juan Camilo Restrepo. Civilians have asked the government, as well as the Liberation Army, to keep the bilateral ceasefire in place, but the ELN want to renegotiate that due to a number of discrepancies in how it's been implemented by the government. One of them, just for an example, is the control system, which is in charge of reporting incidents happening during the ceasefire and has not always been aware and accurate of the places where the events were happening. Civilians do agree that both sides should renegotiate, but they also think that there should be no weapons involved in this process. They should be kept out of the issue due to the potential of doing that to have a positive impact on the negotiation process and also on the communities where the armed conflict is still taking place and that are still very much in danger of paramilitaries. So these civilian groups have also shown numbers related to the positive effects of the ceasefire. For example, they've stated that during these 3 months of peace, 95 killings and 450 possible injuries were avoided. So there's a lot of expectation, a lot of hope about tomorrow. Both teams will arrive in Quito, Ecuador today to start the fifth round of negotiations, and we'll be reporting on what happens in the country and in the future of this agreement.
8 people have been murdered in Colombia's southwest in the Cauca region. The massacre was followed by another assassination of a former FARC combatant.
In spite of the long-sought peace currently being negotiated in Colombia, following signed agreements between the FARC and the ELN, over the past few hours, 8 people have been killed in a confrontation between paramilitary groups and drug traffickers in the municipality of Bolívar in Cauca.
The FARC were active in 242 municipalities. After the paramilitary withdrawal, between 76 and 85 of them have been surrounded by either ELN guerrillas, by FARC dissidents, or by groups that weren't yet aware that they'd been working for drug traffickers.
This situation worries the communities that inhabit these territories. They are still exposed to illegal paramilitary groups, and they feel the continued absence of government.
Toda esta situación preocupa a las comunidades y autoridades.
Communities are really worried and alarms have gone off, with authorities who are on high alert and are calling for help in safeguarding the life and territorial status of Cauca's indigenous communities.
Comunidades indígenas del norte del Cauca y del departamento.
According to experts, even though military presence is important in these territories, it is not enough, and new policies that were established during the peace accords must be put into action.
In post-FARC areas, the army launched Plan Victoria, but it didn't quite work. 15 days ago, they launched Plan Horus, which is basically the same thing, with a different name. Social leaders and former guerrillas are still being massacred.
Cauca's indigenous communities are calling out the Colombian government.
What's going on is just a heads up for what can happen in terms of violence. If the Colombian state does not intervene swiftly over the areas abandoned by the FARC, if there is no official response with a solid proposal to deal with the upsurge of armed players, the war could simply start again.
In the past few hours, a former FARC combatant was also assassinated, marking 33 deaths from the newly formed political party.
The opposition alliance in Honduras has restarted protests against November's election fraud. Thousands of people took to the streets in the city's second city, San Pedro Sula, on Saturday to say that they won't recognize the re-election of President Juan Orlando Hernandez. The opposition intends to swear in its own candidate, Salvador Nasrallah, in the streets later this month.
You will have about 80% of people in the country against him. People who come from other countries will be met with a surprise. As a recommendation, do not come to Honduras.
Do you think people will continue taking to the street?
There's a certainty. The presidential sash will be placed on me in the streets, in one of the cities, either Tegucigalpa or San Pedro Sula.
What if there are more dead and injured?
Violence was created by Juan Orlando Hernandez because he is against the popular will of the people. When there is violence, when decisions are taken, such as fraud in the electoral tribunal, the people complain and he himself is killing people. He has already killed 36 people.
Outgoing Chilean President Michelle Bachelet has arrived in Cuba for a 2-day official visit. During her visit, Bachelet will hold talks with the country's highest authorities and seek new trade and investment opportunities on the island. Michelle Bachelet will also meet with President Raul Castro at the Palace of the Revolution, the Cuban seat of government. And for more on Bachelet's visit, we go to Havana, where Laura Prada files this report.
Yesterday arrived to Cuba President Michelle Bachelet of Chile on a 2-day visit to Cuba. Yesterday, in the afternoon, she met with Cuban writers and artists at their house, and they exchanged views about culture, and also the Ministry of Culture of Chile and the Cuban Institute of Cinema and Cinema Industries signed an agreement of cooperation. In today's agenda, early in the morning, a business forum took place where businessmen of Chile and Cuba exchanged their experiences on their cooperation and looked for new areas of this cooperation. In this moment, the president of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, is in a visit to a pedagogical school here in Havana, where she will be exchanging with representative of schools whose name are related to this Latin American country, and an agreement of health collaboration will be signed between two hospitals, Dr. Ezequiel Gonzalez and the Patriotic Hospital of Central Havana of Cuba, together with the Cuban Society of Patriotic Urology. After this is expected in the agenda, is expected an intervention of the president. In the afternoon, as we've been hearing since yesterday, the expected meeting between Cuban President Raul Castro and President Michelle Bachelet in the afternoon, with the official welcoming to her to the island. She will be, of course, giving her respect to the national hero Jose Marti at the Revolution Square. This is all I have for now. We must wait for this meeting, and this is the final day of her visit to the island. I get back to you.
We thank Laura Prada for that report. Peru's Broad Front Congressman Marco Arana has said that they will ask once again for President Pedro Pablo Kaczynski to be removed from office.
We are discussing this possibility with other congressmen. According to the rules of Congress, we need 26 signatures to present a petition to remove the president from office. We need a political solution to this.
Left-wing movements and human rights organizations have protested in Argentina against the decision to grant home arrest to the former police officer Miguel Ichicolatz for his participation in Argentina's military dictatorship. The decision was made by the 6th Federal Oral Tribunal after the 88-year-old officer was accused of crimes against humanity and corruption and sentenced to life in prison. So let's take a look at who Miguel Ichicolatz was and what he was accused of doing during the military dictatorship in Argentina that took place from 1976 to 1986.
Miguel Ichicolatz was sentenced to life in prison after he was accused of participating in 91 cases of torture. He was close to the head of the police of the Buenos Aires province, Ramon Camps, with who he designed a systematic extermination plan during the military dictatorship in Argentina. These actions were investigated by the country's Federal Justice Department in 2004. He was accused of managing the police groups responsible of kidnapping workers and students during the military operations known as Camps Circuits. The victims were taken to one of the 29 clandestine detention centers used for torture. The testimony of one of the victims, Jorge Julio Lopez, was key during the trial. Lopez disappeared for the second time on September 18, 2006. Just before hearing his sentence in 2014, Ichicolatz showed a piece of paper with the name of the disappeared witness and the word kidnapped. Despite several demonstrations, Miguel Ichicolatz was granted home arrest, even after he said he would commit every crime he was sentenced for again.
Also in Argentina, wildfires are raging in the western central Mendoza province, and firefighters are struggling to control the blaze, which began a week ago. Dry weather conditions and soaring temperatures of over 40 degrees Celsius have exacerbated the issue, with strong winds also helping to spread the flames. Trade union workers have protested outside the Labor Ministry in Panama against the layoff of 50 workers from the country's main airline, Copa. Workers are denouncing the dismissals that followed their November 23rd protest, where requests were made for an increase in salary. At the time, management had promised that there'd be no retaliation against them for their strike action. Trade unions have said that they will continue to protest until they reach a solution. And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Welcome back. Donald Trump's administration has moved to end the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, for 200,000 Salvadorians who had been living and working in the United States since 2001. Salvadorians are the largest group that were granted TPS and will have to leave the country in the next 18 months. Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Alina Duarte, sent this report.
In one of its most significant immigration decisions, the Trump administration said today that it will terminate the provisional residency permits of about 200,000 Salvadorians who have lived in the country since at least 2001, leaving them to face deportation. Today, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Nielsen, announced her determination and the termination of the Temporary Protected Status TPS designation for El Salvador was required pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act to allow for an orderly transition. She has determined to delay the termination for 18 months. The designation will terminate on September 9, 2019. The decision was made, they said, after a review of the disaster-related conditions upon which the country's original designation was based, and the assessment of whether those originating conditions continue to exist as required by the statute. Immigrant advocates, Salvadoran government officials, and many others has implored Nielsen to extend the TPS designation, citing the country's horrific violence and the potentially effect of so many people being sent home. El Salvador homicide rate was the world's highest for a country not at war. The most recent UN data show. Others urged to consider to the approximately 990,000 U.S.-born children of Salvadoran TPS recipients. Their parents now must decide whether to break up their families, take their children back to El Salvador, or stay in the U.S. and risk to face deportation.
New clashes between Palestinian and Israeli forces have sparked around the West Bank after the construction of new and illegal settlements in Palestinian-occupied land. Our correspondent, Noor Harazin, has the details in the next report.
Clashes erupted between Palestinian youth and Israeli forces in several towns and cities around the West Bank today after the Israeli government decided to build 1,200 more illegal settlements in Palestinian-occupied land in the West Bank. Meanwhile, here in the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces attacked Palestinian farmers in the between the eastern border between Gaza and Israel. At the same time, Palestinian Fishermen Committee said that Israeli naval forces shot towards Palestinian fishermen even though they were fishing inside the 6 nautical miles limit. No injuries were reported in both incidents in Gaza. However, the Israeli violations of this truce, this Palestinian-Israeli truce in the Gaza Strip, became like a daily fact for the people of Gaza.
We thank Noor for that report. Belize is home to the largest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere. Coral reefs are notoriously vulnerable to climate change, so Belize has taken the radical step of permanently banning oil exploration in its waters, a move that will protect the reef and its wildlife. Earlier, we spoke to marine scientist Nadia Boud of Belize, who explained the importance of the recently issued law to protect the country's barrier reefs.
It's been a long time coming because we've been asking for this. The public and the conservation community has been asking for this for quite some years. When it came to light that there were petroleum operation licenses issued for different companies. And so when we heard about that in 2010, we got together and we were very vocal in expressing our concerns, for the potential threat this could cause. And so we continued, advocacy and dialoguing directly with the government. We are very pleased to know that we now have this law in place, which pretty much squash any idea of any potential offshore oil exploration within or exploitation within our marine environment. It's an indefinite moratorium. But it's at least a law that is in place that wasn't there before.
And we've come to the end of this evening's news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Pakistani journalist